You can now take a hike in the water of beautiful Lake Tahoe. California state parks have developed Tahoe's first underwater trail. It's called the Emerald Bay State Park Maritime Heritage Trail, and it includes 4 different sites showcasing sunken.
Lake Tahoe is the kind of place that makes people stop mid-sentence. You are standing on the shore talking about something completely ordinary, and then the light hits the water a certain way, and the words simply leave you. The clarity is unreal. On a calm day, you can look down through 60 feet of water and see the bottom as clearly as if you were looking through glass. Writers have been struggling to describe this lake accurately for over a century, and most of them give up and just say, you have to see it for yourself. But here is what the brochures have never told you. Here is what the tourism campaigns, the real estate listings, and the ski resort advertisements have carefully kept out of frame. Beneath that legendary clarity, beneath that sparkling turquoise surface that has made Lake Tahoe one of the most photographed lakes on Earth, something has been quietly happening for decades. And when the water level began to drop and divers went below the surface to look, what they found changed the story of this lake permanently. This is that story, and it is built entirely on documented facts. To understand what was discovered, you first need to understand what Lake Tahoe actually is. Sitting at 6,225 feet of elevation along the border of California and Nevada, it is the largest alpine lake in North America and the second deepest lake in the United States, plunging to a maximum depth of approximately 1,644 feet. Only Crater Lake in Oregon goes deeper. The lake is nearly 22 miles long and 12 miles wide, holding enough water to cover the entire state of California in roughly 1 foot of water. The water temperature in the deep basin hovers near 39 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. At those depths, pressure, cold, and near total darkness create conditions that dramatically slow biological and chemical processes. Things that sink to the bottom of Lake Tahoe do not decay the way they would in a warmer, shallower body of water. They are preserved. That fact is central to everything that follows. The UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center, known as TRC, has been monitoring the lake's water clarity continuously since 1968. Their annual reports document one of the longest-running environmental datasets on any freshwater body in the United States. In 2024, average annual clarity measured 62.3 feet, down from 68.2 feet the prior year. The long-term trend shows steep clarity declines through the 1990s, followed by a leveling off. But clarity at the surface tells only part of the story. What was happening at the bottom was something Turk's standard monitoring methods were never designed to detect. Before the water levels became a headline, a quiet and determined cleanup effort had already been underway for years. Colin West, a filmmaker and diver based in State Line, Nevada, founded a nonprofit called Clean Up the Lake in 2019 after a friend described pulling 600 pounds of garbage from the lake's eastern shore. West decided to go further. He announced a plan to dive the entire 72-mile perimeter of Lake Tahoe's underwater shoreline and remove whatever he found. What they found was extraordinary in scale. By the time the project concluded, West's team of divers had removed over 25,000 pounds of submerged trash from the lake. Using more than 626 air tanks across 81 days of diving, they pulled up aluminum cans, sunglasses, plastic bottles, fishing gear, engine blocks, concrete-filled buckets, car bumpers, lampposts, and more. Among the stranger discoveries were what appeared to be engagement rings, 1980s-era film cameras, and pieces of boats broken down to their frames. West has noted that while much of the trash was accidental, some of it was clearly not. Construction debris from shoreline development projects, electrical wiring, and heavy industrial components do not end up 20 feet underwater by accident. The picture emerging from those dives was not one of occasional carelessness. It was one of sustained chronic neglect of a world-class natural resource. The documentary film 72 Miles, directed by West and released in 2026, chronicles the project in full, including the team navigating wildfire evacuations during the Caldor Fire and diving in winter snowstorms to complete the circumference of the lake. The film is as much about dedication as it is about pollution. While Clean Up the Lake was pulling surface-level debris from the shallows, Another set of divers was making a discovery that would eventually force a major corporation into federal court. Seth Jones, founder of a dive nonprofit called Below the Blue, and his dive partner Monique Rydell-Fortner were conducting routine survey dives along Lake Tahoe's western shore when they came across something that did not belong. Running along the lake floor from Baldwin Beach to Rubicon Bay, crossing the mouth of Emerald Bay, were 6 telecommunications cables stretching a total of approximately 8 miles. The oldest, found in Emerald Bay, dated to 1929. They had been installed by Pacific Bell, a subsidiary now owned by AT&T, using technology standard for the era. Copper transmission wires encased in a heavy lead sheath. When Pacific Bell switched to fiber optic technology decades ago, the company did not remove the old cables. They simply left them on the lake floor. The cables were not inert. Jones and Rydell-Fortner conducted their own tests, submerging a 40-centimeter section of cable in a container of Lake Tahoe water. After one day, lab analysis showed lead concentrations of 650 micrograms per liter in the water. After 7 days, the concentration had climbed to 1,500 micrograms per liter. The legal threshold that triggers mandatory consumer warnings in California is 1/4 microgram per liter. The cables were releasing lead at concentrations thousands of times above that limit directly into a lake that feeds drinking water to surrounding communities. In 2021, the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance filed suit against AT&T under federal law and California's Proposition 65. Their attorneys conducted further testing and found that biofilms, the microscopic algae that form the base of the lake's food chain, showed lead concentrations near the cables running 67,000 times higher than samples taken from nearby clean rock surfaces. This is not a small contamination. It is lead entering the food web at the very bottom. After years of litigation, including a period when AT&T resumed fighting the case after an initial conditional settlement, the company agreed in September 2024 to remove the cables. The total weight of lead-sheathed cable to be pulled from Lake Tahoe's floor, approximately 107,000 pounds. AT&T committed to completing the removal by May 2025. The cables had been sitting on the bottom of one of America's most beloved lakes, leaching toxic lead into the water, for over 30 years after the company had any operational use for them. Professional divers who encountered the cables described being shocked not just by their existence, but by how old and corroded they appeared and how far they stretched. Nobody had reported them. Nobody had removed them. They were simply there, invisible from the surface, doing quiet damage in the dark. In May 2025, a video began circulating widely online. It claimed that the 2024 drought had caused Lake Tahoe's water level to drop dramatically, exposing a hidden world at the lake's bottom. Hundreds of corroded toxic waste barrels leaking heavy metals, dozens of abandoned vintage cars, and evidence that human remains had been recovered and were being held under investigation by the FBI and the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. The video racked up millions of views. Local journalists and researchers moved quickly to investigate. The Sierra Sun and the Tahoe Daily Tribune both published fact checks. Their conclusion was clear. The claims about mass-dumped toxic barrels and preserved human remains at the lake floor were not supported by verified evidence. The video used real footage from TRC, from Clean Up the Lake, and from a separate ROV project called Restoring the Lake's Depths, but intercut that footage with AI-generated images and took statements from real researchers dramatically out of context. The video itself included a required YouTube disclaimer noting that its sounds and visuals had been significantly edited or digitally generated. TRC, Clean Up the Lake, and the Washoe County Sheriff's Office were all named in the viral video as sources for its claims. None of them had made those claims. Representatives of Clean Up the Lake stated publicly that the organization remained committed to real, documented conservation work and directed public attention to Turk's verified state of the lake reports. So where does that leave us? The truth about Lake Tahoe's health does not need exaggeration. The documented reality is already serious enough. The 107,000 pounds of lead cable confirmed by federal lawsuit and AT&T's own agreement to remove it. The 25,281 pounds of submerged trash documented by Clean Up the Lake's 72-mile dive survey. The long-term clarity decline tracked by TRC across more than 5 decades of continuous data, with summer clarity averaging just 53.4 feet in 2024, among the worst on record. The confirmed presence of algal blooms driven by nutrient pollution. The ongoing threat from aquatic invasive species, particularly Asian clams, which alter the lake's sediment chemistry and contribute to clarity loss. The real and documented threats to Lake Tahoe are significant, multi-layered, and growing. Turk's current director, Stephanie Hampton, has been direct. The improvements seen since the 1990s should be acknowledged, but the battle for the lake's long-term health is far from over. The threats the lake faces today are different from those of 30 years ago. Climate change is extending the season of thermal stratification, reducing the natural mixing processes that help clean the lake. Invasive species are altering the underwater ecosystem in ways that are difficult to reverse. Wildfires in the surrounding Sierra Nevada are sending ash and sediment into the lake at rates that overwhelm natural recovery. Each of these is a real problem with real consequences for the millions of people who drink from, swim in, and depend on Lake Tahoe. The viral video was fiction dressed as documentary, but the instinct behind it, the sense that something dark is hiding beneath the beautiful surface of this lake, is not entirely wrong. It is simply misdirected. The real story is not about mob bodies and mystery barrels. It is about a century of human activity, treating one of the world's most extraordinary lakes as something less important than convenience, profit, and avoidance of cost. The lead cables are real. The trash is real. The clarity decline is real. The food chain contamination is real. The removal of AT&T's lead cables from the lake floor represents one genuine, documented environmental victory for Lake Tahoe. A federal lawsuit, years of legal effort, and the persistent work of divers who refused to stay silent about what they found produced a concrete result. 107,000 pounds of toxic material will come out of the water. Colin West's Clean Up the Lake continues its work, having pivoted after the 72-mile Tahoe project to waterways across the country. Their docuseries, What Lies Unseen, documents what they have found in other freshwater lakes, which is exactly what the title suggests. The same pattern of chronic underwater neglect repeated in lake after lake across America. TRC continues publishing its annual clarity reports and its State of the Lake assessments. They are publicly available and based on half a century of unbroken scientific monitoring. If you want to understand what is actually happening to Lake Tahoe, that is the place to look. The lake is still beautiful. The clarity still takes your breath away. On a calm morning, standing on the shore at Emerald Bay, you can look through the water and see the bottom as clearly as if you were looking through a window. That is not false. It is not marketing. It is genuinely one of the most remarkable things you can witness in the natural world. But beneath that surface, the work is not finished. It may never be finished. Every generation inherits the decisions the previous one made, including the ones made quietly in the dark, where no one was watching and no one was supposed to find out. In Lake Tahoe's case, some of those decisions weighed 107,000 pounds and have been leaching poison into the water for 30 years. The water is still dropping. The divers are still going in. And what they find down there is never quite what the surface led you to expect.